Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Health Coach Success Virtual Masterclass. My co-host Laura and I worked hard to pull together this special online event just for you. It's a 5-day mini course in which we interview the best and brightest health coach and marketing experts on the planet to try to understand how they've become such great coaches and entrepreneurs. Included in the 20-plus expert interviews are some names you might recognize. Primal Health Coach Institute founder Mark Sisson, celebrity nutrition expert and New York Times bestselling author J.J. Virgin, author, cardiologist, and staunch health coach advocate Dr. William Davis, Michelle Liotta of Health Coach Power Community, Michelle Norris, CEO of Paleo FX and ID Life Nutrition, and many, many more. The Health Coach Success Virtual Masterclass is now available and totally free for a limited time. Check it out at primalhealthcoach.com/success. Author, speaker, and master life coach Christine Hassler is our guest on the show today. Christine has been in the coaching business for nearly 2 decades. She's truly a pioneer. In that time, she's helped countless thousand people reconnect to their purpose, their passion, and to love. Christine has also personally mentored hundreds of coaches through her masterclasses and collaborations with organizations like Primal Health Coach Institute and Evercoach. Remember that our show notes can always be found at primalhealthcoach.com/radio. We'd love to have you screenshot your podcast player and tag us on Instagram at Health Coach Radio. We'll tag you back. And don't forget to tag Christine too at Christine Hassler. We just always love learning from Christine, and we know you will too. So let's dive in with Christine Hassler. Oh, welcome to the show, Christine Hassler. It's so awesome to connect with you. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here with you too. Well, I was thinking last year at this time we were all in Austin together.
You're right.
It was like April 25th or something last year for the masterclass. Yeah.
Yeah, Paleo FX. Oh, what a bummer. Well, you're out in Austin now, living there with your hubs, and we really want to start off by kind of introducing you to our listeners, because Laura and I know a lot about you. We respect and admire you and have for quite a long time. And I think maybe some listeners of our podcast aren't as familiar with you. So why don't you give us your origin story? Tell us how you got to where you are and what you do, what you specialize in, and, just short.
Oh my God. My origin story is so freaking long. So I will give the short version of it. And if people really are that interested, you can go internet stalk me and hear like 40 versions of the long story. So the short story is desperately high overachiever as a kid because I was teased. Moved out to Hollywood to pursue a career in the entertainment industry as a Hollywood agent to fulfill a deep void I had inside of not enoughness. Got to a very high level in the entertainment industry by the age of 25. Prestigious job, money, the whole thing. Was still miserable, had been on antidepressants since 11. By then was on antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds. Whole life came crashing down after resigning from a Hollywood job, which was like my whole identity. Didn't know what I was going to do with my life. Got dumped by my fiance 6 months before my wedding. Got diagnosed with an undiagnosable autoimmune something. Went into debt and was estranged from my family. And so I had my quarter life crisis at the ripe age of 25, 26 years old. And that really led to my waking up. It's not like I had said like wake up moment where I saw the light and everything made sense. But I started to realize that the way I was living life and a lot of the beliefs that I had in my head weren't necessarily true and definitely weren't taking me to where I wanted to go. And I had been seeing a kind of life coachy person. No one knew what a life coach was. This was back in 2005. And I'd been seeing her, but I wasn't really listening to what she was saying, because she'd say things like, you need to stop drinking, because if you want to get off antidepressants and you want to really grow in your consciousness, you can't be drinking. And I was working in Hollywood. Drinking was part of the culture. I was like, oh, don't take away my wine. Or she'd say things like, you can get off antidepressants. You don't need to be on them. And I'd think, no, I have a chemical imbalance. If you're diabetic, you take insulin. This is what I do. So just a lot of my own programming and conditioning and just resistance to her. But I also think that one of the reasons I ran from her is because unlike psychiatrists and psychologists I had seen since I was 11, who would look at me like a problem to solve, because if you go to psychiatrists, like there's a problem to solve, right? And she didn't look at me like that. She looked at me with just love. She was tough, but it was just so much love and no judgment. She just had such this belief in me. And I think that scared me because I didn't have it in myself. And when someone looks at you and holds space for you where nothing's wrong and you're enough and they just totally believe in you, if you have super low self-worth, which I did at the time, it can kind of feel overwhelming. So I ran from her for years, but then after that quarter life crisis moment, I showed up and I saw her every week for 11 years. And he was one of the people who trained me to be a coach. So it was through that experience that I also sought out books. And I read a lot of personal development books. Power of Now was my first. And so funny, I said this was going to be a short story, and here I go blabbing away. I read Power of Now, and I was reading a lot of personal development books, and none of them were for people in my age range, especially women. It was all later in life. And so I found one book called The Quarter Life Crisis, and it's a good book, but it was about how do you get your career? How do you find your relationship? How do you know your purpose? And I was like, I did that. That formula didn't work for me. Where's the book for the deep stuff, like inner work? So long story short, I wrote a book called 20 Something, 20 Everything. It was the Quarter Life Woman's Guide for Balance and Direction. It was a self-help book for women in their 20s. And I just hit a nerve, and that's such a key to being an entrepreneur and even being a coach. It's like our best client is going to be ourselves. When we can solve a problem that we have, then boom, there's our niche. And so that book took off. And then from there, people just asked me to coach them because I shared some wisdom in the book. And then I got trained as a coach. Then I got master's degrees in psychology and conscious health and healing and NLP and hypnotherapy and blah, blah, blah. So today, what that looks like from 2005 till now, I say I'm a master coach because I've definitely done well over 10,000 hours. I don't even know how many hours of coaching I've done. Who knows? I speak, I write books, I host a podcast where I do live coaching with people on the air, unscripted, unproduced, unedited coaching sessions you get to listen to called Over It and On With It, and lead retreats and train coaches. I think that's it.
That's all.
That's all.
That's it. No big.
Just a few things. Well, this is like a 15, 16 year story. So, wasn't all that when I began.
Of course. Yeah, no, that's actually, we were, Laura and I were talking off air, like, boy, what can we pick Christine's brain about? But it's like literally, what can't we? I mean, you were an early adopter in the coaching realm, and now we get to look at you like, we get to look at you as like a visionary in this realm. Like, what can it become? And so I think we want to go through a lot of like how you branched into different avenues. But I kind of just want to start with the personal development piece, because that's something that's actually something I learned from you. Is I don't think I ever had personal development, believe it or not, in my sights until I got acquainted with you. And I know you've done quite a lot of it, but do you think if you had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is personal development for anybody going through any kind of life change or anybody in general? And where does somebody start with that?
Yeah. Like 100 from 1 to 10. It's so important, especially right now with the uncertainty and global transformation that we're going through. So let's like define personal development. There's a lot of like ways we can define it. So to me, the best way I can sum it up is it's reparenting yourself. So it's looking at everything that happened in our childhood, not like every little thing, but a lot of the things, because really we're pretty much formed by 7. Our personality is really formed by 12, even though our brain doesn't stop forming till 25. So we're still impressionable until then. By 7, but by definitely 12, our belief system, our way of looking at the world, the trauma that's happened to us, that's pretty locked in. Mm-hmm. And so what personal development is understanding that even though you might be a 35-year-old, the reason you get so upset when you don't get invited to a party, even though your 35-year-old can be like, well, they're not my people anyway, is because the 14-year-old inside of you hasn't processed a wound from Mean Girls back in the day. And so personal development is really understanding that we are basically reacting to old programming. And if we want to change our reactions to things, both internally and externally, so our internal emotional reactions, thoughts, things like that, and our external actions, then we've got to go back and heal some of those instances that formed the programs in the first place that are then programming those reactions. So it's interesting, like, I think instead of personal development, I think it should be called like personal, like, understanding, or personally unwrapping, or it's basically a deconstruction and a peeling back layers to really understand why you're acting the way you're acting. But the awareness isn't enough. The next part of development is really going back and healing. So at my grad school, they define healing as the application of love to the places inside that hurt. The application of love to the places inside that hurt. And I love that, because how I coach people and guide people to go back and do healings of significant events that they've had in their life is to just go back with so much love and so much compassion and help those younger parts feel the feelings they never got to feel, say the things they never got to say, express the emotions, and also hear the things that they never got to hear from you. So that's all super conceptual. Let me break it down to an example from my own life.
Awesome.
So one of the things that was traumatic for me as a kid was being teased. So not fitting in, people not liking me, girls passing around a mean note about me in school. So that happened. What are the feelings that I probably felt at the time? Shame, sadness, probably some anger too. Anger at them, anger at myself, confusion. What are the beliefs I formed at the time? Okay, I'm not likable. There's something wrong with me. I don't belong. I can't trust people. I could go on with more, but that's sort of the general theme. So in personal development, what I'd be looking at as an adult is, okay, what are the things in my life that aren't working? Well, I don't have a lot of friends, especially female friends. I have deep insecurity. Why don't I feel confident in my life? And I have a really hard time trusting people, and I feel alone a lot of the time. Okay, so that would be a common complaint. I hear that complaint from a lot of people. And that was one of my complaints in my 20s, is why don't I have, I don't have friends. I don't trust people. Can't trust women for sure. I'm alone. Nobody likes me. I have to try really hard to fit in, all those kinds of things. So to work with that, I go back to that, however old I was, let's say 11 years old, and I allow myself to express the feelings I never got to express. I can either do that through journaling. I can do that in a coaching session by just giving that 11-year-old a voice of what it felt like. I maybe need to do some emotional release work, like crying. I need to hit a pillow and scream and tell those girls off, which I never got to do as an 11-year-old. And then I've got to start looking at the belief systems and forgiving myself for buying into those beliefs, like I don't belong or there's something wrong with me, and start programming my mind with new information. And then comes, and I'm sort of rushing through this and simplifying it, there's a lot more to it, but this is sort of the arc. And then there's the spiritual side of personal development, which is the forgiveness, which is really seen with altitude, not from good, bad, right, or wrong, but really seeing that everything is part of our soul curriculum. So we're divine beings having a human experience. And the main reason we're on the planet is to evolve in our consciousness. We think it's to get the house, have 2.5 kids, have the career, retire, take the trip to the Jamaica, whatever it may be. But those are just sort of things we get to do in expression. Our real purpose is to evolve out of trauma, limiting beliefs, pain, judgment, limiting emotions like anger, fear, and shame, all those kinds of things. So a big part of personal development is getting to the place where you can look and go, this doesn't have to do with religion. Really look and go, all right, my soul or my inner self or some part of me chose to have certain experiences in my life so I could learn certain lessons. So if part of the thing that I'm here to do is to learn oneness, which we're all here to do. The only way a human being can learn is through contrast. We only know hot because we know cold. If there was no cold, we'd have no experience of what hot is. It would just be it. It would just be what it is. And so many of us, it's like we have these contrasting experiences as children and as young adults to then heal, to get to the other side of the embodiment of the more life-enhancing quality. So that spiritual component is really looking back and going, okay, why did my soul pick this? What was I truly learning? And from that place, forgiving the experience. That's how we can truly forgive abusers, oppressors, people that hurt us. Not by bypassing and just doing it in our mind, but by being willing to do the work, feel the feelings, write the nasty letters to the people we never mail, tell them off in an anger release kind of thing, get that out, but eventually get to the learning, get to the lessons, and get to the forgiveness. So that was a really long answer.
Great. No, it's so important though. And as you're telling this story, certainly I can think through instances in my own life, but the person who comes to mind for me is my mom, who is extraordinarily sick right now. She's the person that I always thought was emotionally the strongest. She was able to logic her way out of everything. She was always able to stay calm. She was always able to see. She's the person who taught me to see things from somebody else's point of view. She's the one who taught me how important it is to be able to forgive somebody else so that I can move past it. Yet I look back now at where she is in her life, that by just logically trying to work her way out of it and not allowing herself to sit in it, it's literally made her physically ill.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Yeah. And this is where all this stuff is so relevant for health coaches, because we do have folks that go into health coaching because they like the sciencey stuff. They like the nutrition and the exercise and the blah, blah, blah. And they just sort of discount all that as the woo-woo stuff. And that's really not me. I don't see it as being relevant, but it is so relevant because years after years and decades after decades of harboring this stuff, it manifests itself physically.
It absolutely does. I mean, most physical things have a psycho-emotional component to them. And, that's one thing I've seen, and I'm not making any conclusions or any deductions, but I've seen cancer show up a lot in people who hold all their emotions inside. And let it live, and again, I'm not making any deductions or any conclusions. It's just an observation that I've seen. I'm not saying if you don't feel your emotions, you're going to get cancer, but that's just one of the many things that, I've been able to see, wow, this is a thing. And our body is a messenger. So our body is always giving us clues. For me, I can track every single physical ailment I've had to some kind of belief, some kind of emotion, something that I'm not really, looking at. And when I look at it and I work with it, even a headache or a backache or something like that. I mean, unless I lift something heavy and don't use my abs and my glutes in the right way. But, you can track these things, and it's so empowering to know that. It's so empowering to know that, because I think especially in our traditional healthcare system, which hopefully after all of this is going to go under a massive upheaval and change, is that, injuries and disease happen to you and there's nothing you can do. You just have to turn it over to meds and doctors and whatever. And you're victimized by this disease or this ailment, and your body all of a sudden becomes this threat rather than an asset, becomes a liability. And one of my, missions, especially in terms of health, is to help people understand that their body wants to heal. It so wants to heal. The body wants to get back to a state of homeostasis and health. But if we're not feeling our feelings, I like to explain, distinguish between feelings and emotions. So feelings, from my point of view, are more responses to thoughts or patterns of thoughts. So feelings could include anxiety, guilt, overwhelm, often fear. Because I can create those. I could say something right now that I could create overwhelm. I could create anxiety. A lot, if I'm thinking about the future, if people are thinking, oh, post COVID-19, what's the world going to be like? And start freaking out, you're going to experience anxiety. So those are created feelings, right? But emotions, energy in motion, emotion, are things like anger, shame, sadness, grief, shock, those kinds of things. You can't tell me that if a 7-year-old kid gets abused, that their thought is creating their emotion about it. Like they're going to feel shame, sadness, like that real deep sense of fear, probably some anger, grief, shock, all those kinds of things. So emotions, when they don't get expressed in a healthy way, it's like you're carrying that energetic weight in your body. And how can your body thrive if it has a lot of suppressed, heavy emotions? Because if we just think of like energetics, and this isn't woo-woo stuff, this is actually like quantum science. Emotions like fear, sadness, grief, those kinds of things, shame especially, they have a lower frequency. They have a lower frequency. If we compare those emotions in terms of frequency and energy to things like gratitude, love, well-being, it's a much different frequency. So if we're carrying around these dense emotions and we're just pretending everything is fine, feelings inside not expressed, and we're just logicking our way through life and being like, well, that was in the past and time heals all wounds and I don't need to think about that and so on and so forth, we're just carrying around years, decades of these really heavy emotions. And how can the body thrive? How can the body do cell repair? How can the body deal with inflammation? How can the body fight against viruses and infection and bacteria we don't need when it's also trying to suppress all this emotion? So that's why this isn't just some like love and light, let's all raise in our consciousness. This is also how are we optimal, health-wise? And I see a lot of people that they work out, they eat the right diet, they're drinking their green juice, but they're not processing their emotions. And that's why we see a lot of people that look well and are doing the right things often get sick. And you're like, how'd that person get sick? Well, they were dealing well with the physical, but what about the emotional?
Yeah. I always tell my clients, I always tell my clients, like, I try to teach them that their body's actually a miracle and it's this elegant design and it's responding to the inputs you provide. And I say that as an empowering message. Great news. Your body is responding to the inputs you're providing. And that could be a diet or exercise input. And it also could be an emotional input, an experiential input, or anything like that. And I don't know if anybody else listening struggles with the idea of some of this energetics kind of conversation. But for me, the articulating this high frequency versus low frequency lands. I don't, because I'm a kinesthetic person, I can kind of grasp that. And I can tell when I'm in high frequency and when I'm in low frequency. Mm-hmm. I had a big experience this week where everything was going wrong and I let myself wallow in that. And I actually felt like a low vibrational kind of being. And so for me, I struggle with the sort of the more advanced or deeper concepts, but the idea of frequency, I can really get on board with.
Yeah. Because it's measurable. It's measurable and you can see it. Like if you're feeling heavy, if you're feeling crappy, it's like, that's the day you spill coffee on your white shirt. That's the day like all your emails bounce. That's the day you get in a fight with your spouse. Like that's the day your kids are just little assholes. It's like that. It's just all kind of like, it compounds. And it, one thing that Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I love, talks about is he's like, energy follows thought. And it's true. Like depending on what we're thinking, we're creating energy. So if we're thinking self-critical thoughts or we're thinking, thoughts about worst case scenario or whatever, that's the energy that we're bringing in. So that's why having mental and emotional awareness and knowing that we're not like, we have a mind, but we're not our mind. We have emotions, but we're not emotions. We have a body, but we're not our body. And we can actually have dominion over our thoughts and our emotions. And I think a lot of people feel powerless to their thoughts. Mm-hmm. They think, oh, well, I just judge myself. I just have an inner critic. I can't meditate. I just think. Well, no, not really. Like you have a part of you that criticizes. You have a part of you that judges. You have a part of you that likes to think all the time because that gives you an illusion of control. But that doesn't mean that they're the boss, right? That doesn't mean that those things aren't malleable. They absolutely are. And in so many ways, I think the body, some people may disagree with me, but I think the body is often the easiest to change. It's the mind and the emotions that are often the hardest, but the body is the feedback mechanism. So although it may be easy to physically or aesthetically change your body, to really get it to optimal health, you need that mental and emotional component as well.
Absolutely. I think
you're absolutely right.
I think that some people also, I was thinking about this when you're talking about like going back and talking to the little, your 7-year-old self that got bullied by the kids, and how, you articulated like, well, I can't make friends, I don't trust women, all those things, and how you could relate it back to how you're treated when you were a kid. But I think a lot of people get hung up on their identity. Like, I'm alone because I'm an introvert, or I can't make female friends because I'm intimidating, or something. Like we're quick to brush it off with identity language. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think we have wonderful, super smart defensive mechanisms to protect us from pain. We are so scared of pain as human beings. We will do anything to avoid it. And that's one thing I've seen as a coach for so many years, is that people talk about what they want, but they spend so much more time and energy avoiding what they don't want. And so the reason why they're not getting what they want is because they're spending too much time avoiding what they don't want. And I wrote about this in Expectation Hangover. I call it avoidance traps. And we all have our certain avoidance traps. Mine happens to be rejection. I don't want to get rejected by anybody. So I would avoid risks. I would avoid putting myself out there. I'd avoid speaking up because, God forbid, I get rejected. Other rejection traps are things like abandonment, fear of loss of control. There's different kind of avoidance traps, but rejection is a common one. So to answer your question, a lot of times they're throwing on that identity or that label is really saying, well, I don't want to put myself out there because I'm afraid of failure. That's another avoidance trap, fear of failure. Or I'm afraid of being judged, or I'm afraid of being rejected. So let me just slap on this label that gives me an excuse to not have to to not have to risk falling in that avoidance trap. And that way I'm safe. So the thing about defense mechanisms is they're not bad, because their ultimate purpose is to try to protect us. It's not like our brain creates these to sabotage us or to hold us back. But it's the kind of protection that keeps us from living into our fullest potential and our fullest purpose, because it's basically ego-based protection. And the soul, and when I say soul, what I mean is our deepest aspect, like our deepest essence, our core of who we are, like who we were when we were children before things happened, that made us feel small or unsafe or unloved or not enough or any of those things. And if we keep slapping on excuses for why we can't do certain things or have the things we want, then we just get more and more and more comfortable living in our avoidance trap, and we never really step in to our fullest potential and our highest purpose.
This is so common in our space, in the health coaching world. And we hear it all the time from our coaches, but I belong to multiple health coaching groups with students from everywhere, right? So this is a commonality. People that I think tend to go towards, using health coaching as an example, since this is Health Coach Radio, they want to get out and they say they want to coach people and they want to help people. And I think what's missing, and maybe you can speak to this, is a good definition of what coaching really is. Because a lot of health coaches come to this space thinking it's their job to be the expert in something, to fix people, to know the right diet, what people should and shouldn't be eating, and all this other stuff. And so this, of course, makes them very fearful that they don't know enough. This is where imposter syndrome comes from, right? That they don't feel trained enough, or I don't know enough. And avoidance traps are everywhere, because we see so many coaches. Think about the sheer thousands of, no doubt hundreds, 100,000 at least, have graduated from some sort of health coaching program, right? But have done nothing with it, right? But a lot of this, I think, is because they don't really know what coaching is. They're trying to be something else. I would love for you to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think, and this is why I'm lucky that coaching found me and I didn't really pick it, is because I think that a lot of coaches go into the profession to help themselves under the guise of helping other people. They want to feel needed. They want to feel like they matter. They want to feel like they have some kind of purpose. And there's a little bit of a savior helper complex that I see a lot of coaches run into. And it's dangerous because we don't ever want to believe that we have the power to save anyone or fix anyone or really help anyone in that way. Support, guide, assist, be with, listen, absolutely. But we disempower a human being if we think we have their answers, or we think that it's our job to fix them. So a visual, there's a saying and a visual I like to use to talk about coaching. One, everybody's heard is, you catch fish for a man, he eats for a day. You teach him how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. And so I think that one of the biggest archetypes, if we look at archetypes that I fall into as a coach, it's not savior, it's not helper, it's not healer, it's teacher. Mm-hmm. It's teacher. And you don't have to know all the subjects. Like, think about our teachers in school. They didn't know everything about everything. They knew what they needed to teach us. And as a coach, you don't need to know everything. You just need to be equipped in something that you can teach people. And so that's the first one. And then the second one is that I think of coaching as walking into someone's personal internal cave. And they know where the cave is, they guide the way, but I'm just holding a flashlight. And all the answers that they need are written on the wall of this cave. And the coach is just shining the flashlight. It's just shining the light so that they can see it a little better. And that's what we as coaches can do for people, is we can reflect things back to them. We can notice things. We can observe things. We can just create a loving space for them where they feel safe and ask questions that eventually illuminate their answers. But it's so much more valuable as a coach to help someone find their own answers than to just solve all their problems. And like you said, Laura, I think that's why so many people have imposter syndrome, because they really hold it as, well, they're coming to me with problems and it's my job to teach them exactly how to fix it. And it's really not. It's your job to teach tools and to provide insights so they can take those and they're the ones that heal them. And then the final thing I'll say about coaching is that more than what you know or what you say or your training or anything like that are two things. Number one, how clean you are inside. Don't have to be perfect, but having your own degree of self-awareness, doing your own work, having your own coach is going to make you able to hold a much clearer space for the client, because you're not unconsciously going to be triggered by their stuff. So you're able to be just more neutral. And the second thing is compassion. Co means with, passion means suffering. Just being with their suffering, not there for them, not there, again, to solve, but just holding a space of compassion. And it's amazing the insights a human being can have when someone is just fully present, not thinking about what they're going to say, not trying to pull up some coaching script, not taking a bunch of notes. You don't need to be taking notes unless you're like writing down specific health things. But if someone's just processing something and talking about something, the best value you can give them is just to listen with a space of compassion. And it's amazing the healing that can happen when we hold that space.
Love it. Yeah. Thank you for expressing that, because even in our own community, we get a lot of folks that express frustration when they're working with a client who isn't compliant, let's say. Yeah. Or, we have these conversations and I tell them what their goal should be. Okay. Big red flag. Mm-hmm. Should not be giving your client a goal, mm-hmm. right? And every time this person, but we hear this a lot, or they're asking for advice on how to, I guess, influence or motivate the client to do what they want the client to do. Mm-hmm. So they're looking at this from the wrong point of view.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of reframing that a little bit. So thank you. I appreciate that framing. Yeah.
Yeah. And Christine, one of the things that you do is actually host masterclasses for coaches, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. What do you offer to coaches, and how do these masterclasses work?
Well, so It's really about becoming both masterful and profitable as a coach, because you need both. You need to become masterful, not right away, but that's how you get your 10,000 hours in. And you need clients to do that. And then profitable, because that's the other thing with coaches that I see is it's like, I just want to help. I just want to serve. And I can't talk about money. And I don't know how to price myself. And I hate sales calls and all those kinds of things. So in the masterclass, it's really teaching people just some fundamental, just great coaching skills. Like we do in Primal Health Coach, and helping them feel more confident as a coach, helping them identify what their niche is, because I think that as you start out, it's just so helpful to have a niche, and you don't have niche, however you say it. And you don't have to be married to it forever. So when I started out, my target audience, my niche was 20-something women. That was it. And it was great, because any 20-something woman that had any kind of issue, people were like, oh, Christine Hassler. And it became a referral-based business very quickly. So we help people identify what that is, what their ICA is, their ideal client avatar is, the marketing streams. I really talk about marketing in terms of both content and social media. I think content marketing, whether it's blog, podcast, whatever it is, just putting free content out there is great. And I think you should have 1-2 maximum things that you do regular, because everybody's like, I need a YouTube channel, and I need a blog, and I need a podcast, and I need an email. Oh my gosh, no. Just pick 1-2 maybe that you just do regularly. And then for social media, pick 1-2 maximum where your audience is, and just get consistent with your content and what you're posting. So we talk a little bit about that. And then we really talk a lot about being profitable as a coach. So moving through money blocks. What is your story about money? Do you believe you have to work really, really hard to make money because that's what you saw your parents do, or that's what they told you needed to do? So coaches think that if, I need to be working 20 hours a day, and I need to be learning how to build my website myself. And there's just a lot of limiting beliefs coaches run into. And then a big chunk is on enrollment, like reframing enrollment as not sleazy sales, reframing it as it is part of a coaching conversation. Standing in our worth, standing in our value, and dealing with objections. That's what I see is one of the biggest mistakes coaches make, especially new coaches. They get to the sales part. Someone says, oh, that sounds really great, but I just don't think I can afford it at that time. And then coach says, okay, well, let me know if you change your mind. I'm here. And that's the end of the conversation. No. One thing we're really big on teaching is in a discovery call, or even a consultation, if you do free ones, first of all, the client talks way more, and you only spend a few minutes talking about the issues, things that are coming up. You don't start coaching them. You say, well, this is something we could work on when we work together. I had a client, Susie. She had these issues too. This is what we did with her. I think that could really work for you. I hear this is really hard for you, repeating back a lot of the things that they said. You seem like a great fit. If they are, this is what it's like to work with me. The fee is $5,000. And then you shut up. And then the client has their objection, which is usual. It's rare. Even today in our business, it's rare that someone's like, okay, great, I'm in. There's usually some hesitation. And because the person is, investing in a coach is not like buying a pair of shoes. When you buy a pair of shoes, you're not unconsciously afraid that the pair of shoes are going to make you deal with your mommy issues that you haven't looked at, right? You're not unconsciously afraid that the shoes are going to see places inside of you that you haven't shown anyone before. You're not unconsciously thinking the shoes are going to make you do things that'll change the quality of your life, but it'll feel scary, right? They're just freaking shoes. So that's why coaching is a complicated investment for people, because unconsciously they're feeling, oh shit, like this person could see me. Like this person, I might not be able to hide from. Like I might have to look at some stuff I don't want to look at. So when they're saying I can't afford it, or I need to talk to my partner, or I just have a lot going on right now, what they're really saying is I'm scared. I don't know if I'm worth it. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I'm afraid I'll disappoint you as a client. Like all kinds of whatever their wounding is, that's the inner talk. Yeah. And so as a coach, it's so important to be comfortable coaching through objections, because That's where you can really shine as a coach. And that's something Jill, who's worked with me for 10 years, is so brilliant at. When people have objections, she just gets curious. So you say you can't afford that. Okay, tell me a little bit more about your financial situation. Is that an area of your life that you feel like you're blocked in? Let's talk about that. And what is it like investing for you and yourself? Have you ever invested in yourself before? Do you have any guilt about that? You just get curious and you coach them through these objections. And I think so many coaches miss an opportunity to work with a client because they're not comfortable coaching with objections. And not only are they missing out on a client, but they weren't enough of a stand for that person. Because like I said, a lot of unconscious resistance and fear comes up with people investing in this. And we have to stand in our value and stand in our worth. And if someone really does feel like a fit, and someone really does feel like an ideal client and someone that you can serve, then you've got to like stand with them and help them fight for it a little more, and don't let them off the hook so easily. So those are all the kind of things we teach in the masterclass.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, obviously, Laura and I've been in your masterclass, and one thing I really appreciate about it is that you do spend time teaching coaching mastery, which I have to say, honestly, I feel is overlooked sometimes. We see a lot of business coaches out there, scale to 6 figures, which is cool, which is amazing. Who doesn't want to do that? But the emphasis on coaching mastery is often kind of just like not even talked about.
Yeah.
There's an exercise you do in the masterclass that I think is one of the most transformational things, where coaches are kind of thrust into a coaching conversation. And what's amazing is how good they are at it.
Yeah. 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 They don't think that they are, but they are. And it's so awesome to see them do that and to get feedback on it. And, that's the thing that I think is missing in a lot of the coaching training, and is what people like don't do enough of on their own, is having such, like when I train coaches, they have to record sessions. Then they have to go back and listen to their session, write me notes of what they think they did well, what they don't. Then I listen to that session and we go through it together. And that kind of like being able to go back and look at something, I mean, that's what makes a great athlete or a great musician. And if we're talking about getting masterful at our craft, it's not about being perfect. It's not about thinking I have to have it all, figured out, but it is about learning. And because this is what I see happen. A coach will have a session, either a practice session or a real session. They'll get off the phone and then they'll just beat themselves up. Or they'll be like, that was great. That was such an awesome session. Okay, either way, go back and evaluate what made it an awesome session. What did you do or did you not do? What kind of space did you create for the client, or what made it feel like not so great of a session, and how you can learn from that. And so I think in the beginning, recording your sessions, listening to them, perhaps having someone that has a little more coaching experience listen to them, of course, with the client's permission. We always have that. And just, that's, again, it's about really just loving your craft so much that you aren't trying to get better at it because of insecurity. You're trying to get better at it because you love it so much and you want to serve in that way.
The recording is such a great idea. And just as an anecdote, I had shared in our course material a coaching relationship I had with a client, because I wanted our students to hear what a primal health coaching relationship would sort of sound like. So I recorded all these conversations, and I had to kind of go through and put them all together. And it was such an incredible learning tool. I mean, there were so many times I was listening to the playback, and the coaching relationship went well, but I could hear in every conversation places where I could have taken it a different way, and not in a sense of self-judgment, just in a sense of from a place of self-improvement.
Learning, yeah.
Amazing. It's an amazing idea.
Yeah.
I wonder, so how do you, if you want to do something like that, you have to get the client's permission first, right, to record them. How would you frame that to gain permission to be able to do that?
So if I was just doing it for myself, and I wasn't going to have like another coach listen to it or something like that, I would just say, listen, I want to record our sessions for you and for me. I'm going to send you a recording after every session so you don't feel like you have to take copious notes, so you can really listen to it. And I'm going to listen to it just for my own learning, so I can go back and track things. And then if you do want to ask for permission, you could just say, I have a coach. Her name is whoever she is or he is. She's been training me for, and is willing to listen to my sessions and wants to help me be an even better coach for you. Is it okay? Do I have your permission to allow her to listen? We delete them afterwards. No one else hears them. Just transparency. Total transparency. And you may think, oh, wow, but my client, like if they know I have a supervisor, they're going to think I'm a newbie and that I'm not good enough. And most of the time, people are going to think, oh, wow, I get like an expert here too. Like that's kind of cool. You know, like if I was going to see a doctor and the doctor said, listen, I'm going to record our session because, you know, the chief of this department wants to make sure that you're getting proper care, I'd be like, okay, great. Like the more care I get, the better.
Yeah, consumers like quality control.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I just think it's an amazing idea for practicing coaches. Just think about it. Just think about recording yourself. I do this all the time as a group fitness instructor, as ridiculous as it sounds, but we occasionally record ourselves teaching classes so you can see how your body's moving and how you're cueing things. And I don't know why we don't do that for more things in life. I don't know, but it's just an awesome suggestion. Cool tool.
Well, and I think there's
also kind of on the topic.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Laura.
I was going to say, in addition to just learning, I think sometimes you can walk away from a session with an overall feeling, whether it was good or bad, especially if you think it might not have gone so well. And then I think I've noticed this about myself sometimes. I'll go back and re-listen to it and say, okay, I think that was me. I think that was in my head. And, you know, and certainly a learning tool, but it also just helps me look back more objectively and not pack so much of my own emotions into
Absolutely. Because I mean, that happens to me on stage. After I give a speech, I get off and I'm like, oh man, that wasn't so great. And then I watch the footage and I think, oh, well, that really didn't suck. Like that was actually pretty good.
Exactly.
So it's a good check too of our inner critic as well.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
Well, since we're kind of on the topic of some tools coaches can use to just become more masterful, to chip away at mastery. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you had to give a little short list to coaches listening, what they could do, what they could implement right away to begin moving toward mastery. What might that list include?
So like we talked about, clearing yourself first. So doing your own emotional work, your own meditation, your own work with another coach, because you are just going to be, there's going to be more unconscious trust between you and the client if you come to it clear. Again, using the doctor analogy, I don't want to go to see a doctor who has a cold. Like, no, thank you. Like, I want health. So again, don't have to be perfect. Don't have to have everything figured out. Just because you had a fight with your partner the night before doesn't mean you have to cancel your clients the next day. Just work with yourself a little bit before you start your sessions. Set an intention before you start your sessions. I don't like back to back without at least like a little 15-minute break. So you can kind of clear, wash your hands, clear that person, get ready for the next person, have your water, whatever you need to do. So just practices that make it sacred on the front and the back end, I think are a good way to just start the container. Always starting the session with, I don't do a lot of small talk with my clients. Obviously, with what's going on right now, there's a little COVID-19 talk, but usually it's like, hi, Erin, I'm so happy we're in for our session today. Tell me what's been going on with you and what your intention for the session is. So just a little like recap, not hi, how are you? How's the weather? Like small talk, we're at a cocktail party, but really getting into the focus. Have them set an intention. And then I'm very comfortable guiding people through visualizations or meditations. If you're not, you could just say, all right, well, why don't we take 3 deep breaths together? And as you're taking deep breaths, I just invite you to, bring your awareness to your breath. Know there's nothing you need to figure out, know where you need to be. Just really bring yourself into the present moment, set this time for yourself. Just any kind of centering breath work, just to anchor them in. So that kind of like before and after is really important. And then at the end of the session, I always just review some of the things we've talked about, takeaways, those kinds of things. So just having your bookends in place is important. In terms of specific while you're coaching tools, so reflective listening or perception checking, whichever one you want to call it, is beautiful because it's amazing how often, so what that means is the client says, well, I'm just really feeling insecure lately because my boss hasn't given me a lot of assignments. He's given them to my coworker, and that's making me feel like I'm not doing enough. I would repeat back, okay, so you're feeling a little insecure lately because your boss isn't giving you as many assignments and you feel like they're going to your coworker. Is that accurate? And that kind of reflective listening and perception checking, you don't have to do that with every single sentence, but doing it frequently, especially when they say something where their voice inflection changes, their body language changes, it doesn't quite make sense, or you feel like it's a huge statement that they just kind of like bounced over, that's when you want to really put it back to them. So I just heard you say, blah, 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 blah. Is that accurate? And a lot of times they'll be like, oh, yeah, I can't believe I said that. Or, well, no, I really didn't mean it that way. Or I don't know if I really believe that, or whatever it is. So that's a great tool to use. Another great tool to use that I like to play out with clients, especially during times of uncertainty, is finishing their worst case scenario, what if thinking. Yeah. So instead of, as a coach, sometimes the tendency, if a client comes in with a lot of anxiety and a lot of panic and a lot of worry, is to fix it, is to reassure. Is that, okay, you're really worried about being able to pay your next rent. Let's talk about it. How much money do you have? Like, we get right into strategy instead of, okay, like, oh, I accept that you have anxiety right now. Can you accept that? Can you accept that you're scared about this situation? Okay, great. Let's play out those worst case scenarios. What if you can't pay your rent? Then what? Well, then I might have to borrow money from my parents. Okay, you have to borrow money from your parents. Then what? And you just take them down until they realize they're not going to die. Like, you take them to their worst case scenario possible situation and you work with that. That's another beautiful tool I love using. I also love using the tool of responding when a client says, I don't know. I love saying, well, if you did know, what do you think the answer would be? Right. They're like, no, I really don't know. I'm like, well, just pretend to know. Just take a shot in the dark. So I don't settle for I don't know. I really don't. I also love really busting them on beliefs. So when a client makes a affirmative statement, like, I can't do that, or whatever the affirmative statement is, I go, really? How do you know that's 100? How do you know that's true? Like, how do you know that's true? Well, my mother always said that about me. I'm like, I didn't know your mother was God. Can I meet her? That would be amazing. You know, and sometimes bring humor to it. You know when to bring humor and when not to, but when really busting people on their beliefs and showing them that a lot of the things that they're believing just really, really aren't true. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, a tool that I use a lot, and I'm just more comfortable with doing work in people's pasts. And, you know, I'm not a licensed therapist, but so much of what I do would fall into the psychology therapy boat, is I take people back and I ask if they're really triggered by something. I say, what does this remind you of? Like, what does this situation remind you of? And they'll say something. I'll go, can you go back even further? To remind you of something from when you're even younger. And we'll get to a specific memory. And then we'll do the work that I was talking about earlier with going back to that younger part, talking to it, reframing the beliefs, allowing motion to come up. And I do want to say, just because you're a coach doesn't mean that you can't handle people's emotions. Right. You know, you're not a therapist. If someone has serious trauma or you think they really need therapy, you can always refer out. But you can hold a safe space for emotion, because one of the biggest ways emotion heals is just if it's released in a safe space. So I could go on and on with coaching tools, but I think that's good for now.
Well, I remember one example you gave, I think it was in our course actually, which I thought was such an aha moment, is like when a toddler has a tantrum, it just has the full experience of that tantrum and calms itself down. Yeah. And for some reason we get into adulthood and we feel like we have to be like, you know, suppressing this and managing it and putting like fences around it. I just thought that was such an incredible visual.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's like human beings, the reason why our emotion feels so scary and gets stuck and we can't shift it is because we don't ride it all the way through. Right. You know, if I really am upset and I let myself scream and hit a pillow and then cry, and then, you know, eventually it will just move through me. It will just be gone. But if I suppress the anger and I let it leak out through irritability, or I, you know, just don't get it out in the full range of it, then it's just gonna keep coming back around.
And so a coach can hold space while somebody has their full experience.
Absolutely.
You don't have to be licensed to do that.
No, absolutely.
Right. In our world too, and with health coaching, this tends to manifest itself in binge eating.
Yep.
Right? Can it manifest itself in abusing exercise?
Oh, yeah.
Huge. Can manifest itself in certainly insomnia. And my favorite, because I suffered from it, is the manic stress. Yes. Like the always running woman. it's like, God forbid I actually stand still and just feel comfortable in my, this happened after my divorce as an example, right? Did not like being home alone by myself. So I always had to manufacture shit to do. And I'm always busy. And that's why, you know, and so from health coaches listening, all of these things that we talk about as far as building and creating the environment that promotes a healthy human is all wrapped up in this stuff. And if you're not really expressing it, it's gonna come out someplace else. And those are just 4 examples.
Yeah, it will. I'm glad you touched on the busyness thing, because I think that's one of like the one that's hard to spot, because there seems, maybe it's changing now, but there seems to be a lot of societal approval of being busy. It's like a badge of honor. And that is one of the ones that really, really, really is good at numbing, because you're so busy, you're so distracted that you're not feeling it. And I think what's great about this quarantine time is that, you know, people hopefully will just sit and feel, like just sit and allow whatever needs to come up.
I actually feel bad saying it, but there's so many things about this isolation period that I like and I want to keep, and that's one of them.
Oh, me too. Yeah, me too, for sure. Yeah, for sure. As an introvert, I love it.
Yeah, I think, and I think there's a lot across the board. It's also part of why I think this time is so stressful, you know, is we're not comfortable sitting and just being, whether it's with ourselves or with our family. But, you know, Brad and I have just loved, even though it's hard to work with I keep muting myself because I keep hearing the little fat feet downstairs pounding the floor and screaming. I'm like, mute, mute. So you guys don't hear them. But, you know, I get to see them all day. I just get to come down and I can see them doing stuff. And it's just, I'm going to take it and cherish it for now, because it won't be here forever.
Right.
You know, so as a way to wrap up, you work individually with people, you have your podcast, you do retreats, and you also have products. You've got like a line of courses and programs. And could you give our listeners a bit of a sneak peek as to kind of the type of programs you run, to sort of inspire them for what they might be able to offer their clients, but then also how they can work with you and get a little piece of you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So it's all under, if you just go to my website, Christine Hassler, it's all there under courses. And if you have any questions about anything, you can email jill@christinehassler.com. So there's 2 things I want to talk about I think would be great for the people listening. The first is the Masterclass training for coaches, which is I took a 2-day workshop that I taught live for coaches and what we talked about, becoming masterful and profitable as a coach, and turned that into a course with worksheets and other downloads and things like that. So that's there. And then there's also my course called Personal Mastery. So if you are wanting to dive deeper in personal development, if you want to get some tools to use as a coach with your clients, then I highly recommend doing Personal Mastery. It's basically how to heal on the emotional, mental, behavioral, spiritual, and physical level. So I teach the first 4 modules, and then my husband teaches the physical module. I'm in the emotional, I'm teaching you emotional release work, the temper tantrum technique that we talked about, mental, teaching reframing beliefs and all the ways to change the mind, and behavioral, we're looking at getting out of those avoidance traps and those defense mechanisms that drive behavior. Spiritual, we're getting to forgiveness and really looking at our soul curriculum. And then the physical, Steph's taking you through some incredible breath work and just some health tips to change the physical container. So we actually are offering a $200 discount now for the program. And if you just go to christinehassler.com/mastery, and then you go to the checkout page, you enter health as a promo code, and then that's when you'll get the $200 off. And there's a 12-month payment program as well. And what I love about my Personal Mastery course too is you also get monthly group coaching calls with me. And there's a Facebook community, and it's not like a 5-week launch or something like that. It's a program that's open at any time. The community continues to build. The monthly calls you get access to for a year. And it's just a really comprehensive program. And if you want to do the deeper work and learn those deeper tools so that you can bring some of those tools into your sessions with your clients, then that's the one I'd recommend. And if you're interested in both, just email Jill@christinehassler.com and she'll work out something with you.
Wonderful. Just wonderful. Thank you very much, Christine. It's been such a pleasure to catch up.
I just have loved working with you both. I just adore and respect you both so much. So thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, we miss you. I know with this whole COVID thing, it's unlikely a masterclass is happening soon of our own. So, but we'll have to revisit the next one. It's so good to see your beautiful face and talk to you. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.